Hello everyone, my name is Anojah and these are my group members Jessica and Samantha. Today we will be analyzing Miss Educator's learning scenario A. Based on our observation about Miss Educator's assessment methods, we felt that it was teacher-centric and it did not allow any opportunity for students' improvement. Before we move forward, we wanted to explore the goals of assessments, and they are as follows: to monitor student progress and development. A good assessment enables students to understand the expected standards with a clear, informative rubric, and it also forms evidence of progression to learning objectives.
Objective: to promote opportunities for students' improvement through feedback. What is feedback? Information about reactions to a product, a person's performance of a task, etc., which is used as a basis for improvement. Feedback needs to provide information specifically related to a task or process of learning that fills a gap between what is understood and what is aimed to be understood. Why is feedback important? Feedback is a vital part of a learner's skill set. It can provide clear and helpful guidelines to assist in improvement, specific criteria used to measure more organized, opportunities for students to improve as part of other learning activities. It allows for growth in students' learning, and feedback can fuel constructive reflection by the learner. Types of feedback. Feedback is intended to explain how a final grade was assigned. Feed forward is made earlier in the process and is intended to point students in the right direction for completion. Feedback includes written comments, electronic comments, meetings with individuals, suggestions from peers.
So now we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy and its role in assessment. This will explain things not just from the student perspective, but also from the teacher-learner relationship and how we can understand the influence of the teacher on the learner's perception. So we have an over-reliance on the lecture, and that can actually reduce not just student engagement, but also the depth of learning that's occurring. So by examining Bloom's taxonomy, we can gain more depth of thinking to alleviate that. In this model of Bloom's taxonomy, the colored blocks are shown as steps, so I like to call this the staircase. And we want to make sure we're going up the stairs to a higher level of thinking. It shows us not just the cognitive processes, but it also gives examples, and we can see how it correlates with the knowledge dimensions as well. In the case study presented, the lecturer was using lower levels, where the students are expected to just remember and recall facts. So they are still demonstrating their knowledge through these multiple choice exams, but there's no room for improvement. There's no application or opportunity to analyze or create anything. So how are we integrating these different cognitive processes and knowledge dimensions? The evidence illustrates that this type of summative assessment is poorly delivered because it's either too vague, not understood, or misunderstood. It has bad timing, but frankly, it has a negative impact on the motivation for learning because it's a high-stakes assessment and it utilizes exam-only formatting. So it's not focusing on the learning goals, but the performance goal. Here we have the cognitive process. So this is just to see it from a student's point of view. The teacher starts out with setting the learning goals, the criteria, and standards, and this is an external thing. So within the sticky note is a student's internal process. So that's where we're going to see those cognitive process demands of knowledge that Bloom's taxonomy is referring to. So anytime the teacher assigns work, there are different paths that the student takes, whether setting their own goals, using their own preferred strategies to get to their internal learning outcomes, because that's a very individual thing, right? So the objective for learning isn't always going to meet the outcome. For instance, I might aim to achieve a 90% score on a test, but I might only end up getting 75. So that's the external observable outcome, because someone else is grading that paper. So what the lecturer in the case study failed to deliver on is the external feedback process and how that relates directly on the student's motivational strategies. So this process that is self-regulated by the student, it's called the task performance external feedback cycle. So this strategy is now looking at it from the teacher angle. It's based off of David Nichol and his concepts of formative assessment for self-regulated learning. And he says that self-regulation can lead to changes in the student, which is the only way to tell if learning has occurred. For students to use feedback to improve their work, it starts with supporting them while they're in the process, not after the fact when it's no longer relevant because it's too late to use it. Then you can give them opportunities to improve by introducing two-stage assignments, where feedback on stage 1 helps improve stage 2. And then they actually have the opportunity to apply it. So now the teacher is modeling how to close that performance gap, right? So giving them strategies that they might choose. And if there's a gap, it's going to be explained to them properly, giving them a specific action point. As well, we want to provide opportunities to repeat the same cycle. Involving the students in groups can also help them identify their own action points after they have already received that feedback. And we want to recognize the next steps in learning after the outcome has occurred, because that helps us to understand how our learning objectives measure against our learning outcomes. Now we've decided what we need our program outcome to be. We're still working our way backwards using Bloom's taxonomy levels, and we're getting into the nitty-gritty now of what is the evidence that formulates the actual outcome. As you can see, it moves higher up in levels of the learning stages, with synthesis and evaluation where your higher level thinking is utilized there. When we look at the case study, the knowledge and comprehension could be demonstrated by picking the correct multiple choice answer with memorization, but it is on the lower end, and evidence for program outcomes will not all be obtained this way. So to look at it from different angles of different professions, we're doing our backwards design because our evidence is going to be specific to how we are utilizing our skills and competencies. So what are the psychomotor skills necessary for a surgeon in comparison for an architect? Are they going to need the same physical capabilities as the architect? Probably not. And how they demonstrate their knowledge will differ cognitively in terms of analyzing houses, which is very different from analyzing a human body. So this just breaks it down. From there, we can get into the actual courses and the course-specific learning objectives, which is still going to correlate with the program outcomes. As we work our way backwards, we're filtering out and scaling back from the bigger picture concepts to the much smaller specific details like assignments, instructional methods, and assessment format. This is where we finally make it to the importance of feedback and improvement. So that way we can meet those program outcomes as professionals. So we already know what the goals of assessment are and the focus that we chose. So we chose that it's necessary to be closing that gap between the current and the desired outcome performance. In this case study, this was absent, which was very problematic because, as Nicole stated, that is how we know learning has occurred at the micro level through students' changes. So if you don't have opportunity to improve, how do you actually improve?
Assessment. Formative assessment refers to a wide variety of methods the teachers use to conduct in-process evaluation of students' comprehension, learning needs, and academic progress during lessons, unit, or course. Assessment Activity 1. Self-assessments that ask students to think about their own learning process, to reflect on what they do well or struggle with, and to articulate what they have learned or still need to learn to meet course expectations or learning standards. For example, providing discussion boards for students or exit slips. Assessment Activity 2. Peer assessments that allow students to use one another as learning resources. For example, workshopping. A piece of writing with classmates is one common form of peer assessment, particularly if students follow a rubric or guideline provided by teacher. Examples are allowing students to grade each other's work before handing it in, and allowing students to work in pairs or small groups.
Our suggestion to Miss Educator are as follows. She should create a space for students to interact with each other using resources like discussion boards, social media, and Slack, Facebook, etc. This will create a bond between the students. They can help one another and progress along with the course. She should also encourage students to practice providing peer feedback. This will create an opportunity for them to communicate with each other and improve their learning process. She can also start off with creating PowerPoint slides or cheat sheets of the topics that are covered each week for students to refer to. And she should focus on creating a structured and clear syllabus for students. The assessment Miss Educator should use are peer assessments, self-assessments, and authentic assessments. These assessments will help Miss Educator with the way students learn, and they will help her with creating the best learning and teaching environment.
And we just want to thank you everyone for making it to the end of our video, and I hope that you found it informative and learned something.